Beyond the fancy gowns and the beautiful environment in Bridgerton, there's a big stink underneath, which is peculiar to the Regency era, and how the characters in Bridgerton manage their hygiene is something you might find inadequate but fascinating. The beauty and perfection surrounding the Bridgerton era have made it impossible for viewers to think of the worst that could happen privately. During the Regency era, there was no proper toilet, and deodorants and their heavy but pretty looking gowns were always hard to keep clean. Bridgerton is set in the summer, and in that era, there were many layers under their dresses, which means they sweat a lot, making laundry even harder. But the most insane thing during that era was the stench and bad odor covering what Bridgerton didn't show you. In the Regency era of Bridgerton, there was no toilet, and humans always need to excrete, which means even at their big and important balls, the corners are polluted with smells, urine, and other kinds of human waste. Bridgerton tried to portray the characters as elegantly smelling people, especially with how they take luxury baths in metal tubs, which were almost non-existent in that era. Also, you will be shocked to learn that there was barely clean water to take a bath with at the time. Preparing a bath would take a lot of time and planning, so it's best overlooked and covered with fancy outfits that don't entirely hide the smell. Also, no makeshift restroom or anything similar was prepared for guests attending a ball at the time, so the outside was always stinking of human liquid and solid waste. Sometimes, when doing their private business outside becomes impossible, they find other hidden convenient spots to use. In Bridgerton, during a ball or any important event, the characters always hang around having small talks, so it wouldn't be wise for anyone to bend where they can be seen in such scenarios. So, the men would get any chamber pots kept in the dining room cabinets and let out their private business there. However, women might quickly use the chamber pots in the drawing room if no men are present, but if there's not enough privacy, they find a small room on the ground floor of the building to relieve themselves. In Bridgerton, where most of these apply to the wealthy people in the society, they always have their servants nearby who will collect the pot and empty it. Also, women mastered standing up or squatting gently without getting their dresses wet. Chamber pots are not as portable as they are mostly seen in homes in that era. But then there's a smaller pot called bordaloo for the female, which their maids carry wherever they go. Bridgerton may not have shown it, but most female characters stepping out in the series always had this fancy looking pot hidden somewhere for convenience. Interestingly, it was easier for women to stand and pass off waste because they didn't wear knickers in the Regency era, as that was seen as something belonging to men. Even the cast of Bridgerton confirmed that the female characters had no knickers in their costumes, as they tried to stay true to how dresses were worn then. But later in the same era, drawers became widely used, and they were similar to knickers, except that they were left open in the middle to allow women to relieve themselves freely. Believe it or not, this meant that having periods during that time was a mess that was considered embarrassing but hard to take care of. As we continue to talk about hygiene in Bridgerton, we will soon get to discuss how they take care of their monthly period, which will leave you in shock. In the Bridgerton era, wealthy people could afford a private waste area in their bedroom, which looks exactly as you are seeing, and a cesspool where all the wastes gather under the house and get released into large bodies of water. So if you are wondering where the guest waste goes after using chamber pots during a ceremony, you should know that the servants in the host's household would put them all in a slop pail before dumping them in the cesspool. So all those great mansions in Bridgerton have many human dumps sitting under them. The smell is hard to hide, which became a norm for the Regency era, but this was reduced by flushing the latrines with scented water. Wastes were so poorly managed, but sometimes they get the services of night soil workers who come for the human wastes in the household to transfer them to the London sewer. Also, if waste becomes too much or badly managed in a house, it can start forming a stream to get into the neighbor's compound. And that means the Bridgertons and the Featheringtons must have had this issue at one point, and that explains their cold shoulder towards each other. Later in the Bridgerton era, the human body's waste could get transferred directly into the collective city sewer, and most of this found itself in the River Thames, while some got into Hyde Park's Serpentine Lake. And you know, the crazy thing about Bridgerton is that this lake is a part of the show, and it's portrayed as the pretty area for hanging out, picnics, parks and romantic hideouts. But if Bridgerton had been real, the whole water area smelled excrement, and it was a big issue that later led to the Great Stink, which also led to a cholera outbreak. Interestingly, these developments didn't stop the Regency era people from bathing in the water, even though the lake had sticky, dirty mud of human waste at the bottom. But most people refused to bathe because the water was seen as the source of many diseases at the time, not knowing it was because the rivers and lakes converted into cesspools which breed dangerous bacteria. But all of these didn't mean that people weren't trying their best to be hygienic in the Regency era of Bridgerton. It's just that they understood it differently. At the time, the Europeans thought the best way to remain clean was to rinse their faces and hands in water and change the linen under their dresses. However, they also used to get a full body wash using a small bowl to scoop water and a sponge to scrub sweaty places like the armpits. Also, cold baths were more common because heating up water required extensive effort, fuel, and expenses. Some go for months and even years without being able to get a full body bath, but when they did, soaps were available to keep people clean, and it was very popular among the upper and middle classes. Most of the soaps were homemade and scented like rose and lemon. So even though full bathing was rare, they cleaned it thoroughly whenever their whole body was washed. So with all these challenges and the total absence of showers, many people in the Bridgerton era developed a personal smell that the world might find offensive today. Interestingly, body odors were especially taken care of by women who were sensitive about how others perceived them. There were perfumes used in the Bridgerton era which smelled fresh and floral. These perfumes were made from plants like exotic lilies, roses, and many other sweet-smelling flowers. Anthony revealed that women in that era put extra effort into their scents when he took in Kate's scent. The women who weren't rich enough but still cared about their hygiene used lots of lavender oil to eliminate bad smells. Since there was no deodorant to mask the armpit smell, they made a moon-shaped special dress shield to cover the armpit and soak in all the sweat, automatically removing the odor and preventing the dress from getting stained. This dress shield was a lifesaver for many, as the laundry was very difficult to do, and it saved the people in the Bridgerton era from repeating a dress smelling like sweat from the previous time it was worn. Also, if you've noticed in Bridgerton, they have many dresses for different occasions, as what they wear indoors is completely different from the outdoor clothes. So changing clothes was more regular than bathing. People with lots of white shirts, like the Bridgerton men, were known to be very wealthy because it was a hard task to keep them clean. But for someone to constantly wear a white shirt means they have a lot of them, numbering from 10 to 60, and only rich people could afford that. Outfits for walking are immediately changed once inside, and you know that the Bridgerton ladies wear different and relaxing dresses at home. They do this to eliminate the smell and dirt collected on the walking dress and change it to something cleaner. Cleaning dresses was another big challenge in the Regency era, but for the characters in Bridgerton, keeping their clothes clean was easier because the high-class society had servants who prioritized this. However, if you remember what the other side of Bridgerton looks like, you would know laundry is a hard task, as the poor members of the society usually always appear dirty. It takes 2 days or more to wash and clean clothes belonging to a household in the Bridgerton era, which is why the wealthy folks had a lot of helpers who did this. Washing clothes involved many major processes, including dragging water from the river or well, boiling heavy dresses and linens, and applying sharp soaps, which could all cause bodily wounds. Then, rinsing requires even more water, which must be pulled before a cloth can be considered clean. From there, the water is strained and the clothes are hung with hopes that rain doesn't get them wet. A house with limited help would require the woman of the house to join, as it's a lot to get through. And this is why fancy dresses always get their due compliments in Bridgerton. It takes a lot of work to make them look clean and beautiful. Another fun fact about the beautiful Bridgerton clothes is that they rarely wash them because the outfits are done with perfect and natural materials which are easier to clean. However, the underwear and linens were made with stronger materials, and many characters in Bridgerton owned many of them because they were frequently washed from period stains and other things. In the Bridgerton era, we mentioned earlier that knickers weren't allowed for women, but that doesn't mean the women were bleeding freely on their dresses, just like when Daphne had her period in the first season. So they would wrap a tiny cloth on their hip and wear a muslin nappy or washcloth from the front to the back, neatly tucked tucked into the belt made on the waist. To wash period-stained rags and clothes, they would first be soaked and treated for the stains before being washed. If the Bridgerton characters struggled so much with body and cloth hygiene, best believe it was even worse for their teeth as they had stinky breath. Interestingly enough, dentistry was non-existent, and barbers who gave haircuts were the same professionals who tended to the teeth, which is crazy. And these barbers were always ready to pull out bad teeth, and there were lots to extract because tooth decay was a common Regency era problem. However, the folks in Bridgerton didn't have things that bad because they were mostly wealthy, and the upper class at the time had access to customized teeth care products. Things like toothpicks, brushes, and tooth powder were the things only people with money could get. Tooth powder mostly consists of grounded egg or oyster shells, bone, and other fine ingredients. The lower class usually had to settle for black soot instead of the expensive tooth powder for cleaning their teeth. They also utilized herbs and the twigs of trees to clean their teeth. You won't believe there was also mouthwash available then, which was all put together using natural ingredients. Also, the rich had the best teeth because they fed on fine dining, which contains nutritious foods that are easy to wash and don't cause cavities or stinky breath. In the Regency era, there was also lots of sugar due to slavery and colonialism, so it was easily accessible, but also caused a lot of damage to the dental care of the society. As in modern times, sugar was present in almost all foods in the Regency era, and before sugar became cheap, being able to afford it was a sign of wealth, and the result of taking so much sugar was dirty black and brown teeth, which were respected and fashionable at one point. But as soon as sugar was everywhere, rich people moved towards healthier diets, and those who fed mostly on sugary meals would have no choice but to always get their teeth checked at the barber's shop. Then, clean and white teeth started growing more popular around the same time, and there were many methods of teeth whitening that were very tasking but effective if applied thoroughly. Sadly, any decaying tooth gets pulled out without using anesthetics. So the Regency era of Bridgerton tried their best to take dental hygiene seriously, even if they had uneven teeth with breath that wasn't so perfect. But then the romantic kisses you see on Bridgerton should tell you the reality in that era isn't that fantastic. Hair in Bridgerton is another great sight to look at, and unlike how bodies were treated in the era, hair got much better care than the body, and we will break them down for you. Caring for the hair by washing and brushing was very important in the Regency era, as viewers could see that Bridgerton characters paid special care to their hair. So unlike bathing, they brushed their hair every day and sometimes multiple times. It was necessary to keep dust off the hair. Hairs got infested with lice then, and the right way to reduce them was to brush them out constantly. Washing the hair was a different topic because some believed regular hair washing was unhealthy, while some thought it was, which many still get confused about even today. However, since there wasn't much shampooing, they applied hair pomade made of animal fat to the hair, which helped to moisturize. Crazily enough, some of the hair treatments at the time were made to get lice away, but the weird recipes created even more crawling pests in the hair. But then pomatums and pomades helped in styling the hair in the Regency era, and the hairstyles that looked like gel were applied to them in the show were just pomades doing the work. Although these recipes helped the hair look great, they also had many negative effects. In the Bridgerton 3 trailer, fans have seen more of Colin's chest hair, but how was that cared for in the Regency era? Hair being too much on men wasn't popular then, and it's also not expected to be seen on women. However, razors were available to get men cleanly shaven, while chest and private body hair were rarely tampered with, so any hair in the open view was usually seen as unkempt, which is why Bridgerton characters didn't even keep beards and were mostly shaved clean. However, hair removal products were available, especially for hairy women who wanted to shave off the hair that could be seen on their bodies. Products like beeswax were heavily demanded because women wanted clear skin. All of these are evident in Bridgerton, where they pay perfect attention to how their skin is viewed, which is one of the secrets behind their glow-ups.